Hi everyone, we are here for Smarketing, a sales and marketing love story. We're excited to have you all here. My name is Brianna Evans. I'm on the marketing side of the house. I'm responsible for field marketing for our East region, and we work with both enterprise and SMB. In terms of love stories, I would say that my biggest love story is actually with my dog. Her name is Reagan National, and I named her after an airport in DC because that's where I grew up.
I'm Megan McClendon. I oversee one of our inside enterprise sales teams at Tableau. And Brianna and I have actually had the good fortune of working together twice now at two different companies, which I think is part of the reason that we're up here today. Brianna was actually formerly in sales when we worked at our last company, and then moved over to marketing. And so I think when we were in sales, we were two salespeople trying to figure out how to have the best relationship with marketing. And now that she's moved over, it's a little bit of a different capacity. And I think because of those various scenarios, we've really figured out at least the fundamentals that it takes to establish the best partnership between sales and marketing, and especially in a constantly evolving industry.
And aside from loving me, what is your love story with?
That's a very vague question. I will tell you a odd love story. I am definitely a dog person, not a cat person, so I'll stay on theme. But I live with two cats that I'm also allergic to, that I inherited with my fiance. So I'm getting there. I think I like them. Yeah, so I won't dive into that because that gets complicated. It's a little bit like Smarketing. Yeah.
So you guys have learned a little bit about us. We're just curious about the people in the room. Raise your hand if you are team marketing. Woohoo!
I'm sales, but I'm also team marketing.
Yeah.
Sales? Yeah. Anyone neither? Sweet.
Yeah, come support our relationship.
Just want to see what the hell sales and marketing do with their lives? Yeah. Awesome.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you guys here. Just a little intro into why we're here for this presentation. As Megan mentioned, we've worked a few companies together and worked at a few different places. And one of the things that you'll notice is that sales and marketing loves to say that we love each other, that we work well together, that we're a well-oiled machine. But if you notice, when things start going badly, it really easily can become a pointing fingers type of game. So how do you make sure that that's not the case, and how do you develop a relationship that's built on trust and a solid foundation?
Yeah, and it's funny, in preparing for this presentation, I started thinking back to my former relationships, if you will, just like other marketing leaders that I've worked with, both prior to Tableau and at Tableau. And I realized that I just really didn't have much of a relationship at all, which I'm guessing maybe some of you can relate to. We kept each other in touch, and before Brianna joined Tableau, my relationship with marketing at Tableau was very surface level. We exchanged emails, we kept each other updated, kind of checked the box, and I was like, oh yeah, I work with marketing. But if I think back to it, there just wasn't a lot of substance into how we worked together. We didn't really dig into the detail of how can we help each other accomplish each other's goals. And now I feel like now that I know what good looks like, looking back, I'm just wow, that just wasn't working. Has anyone done that? You find yourself in a good spot, and then you look back and you're just wow, that just was that was just not working. So hopefully, I think we've identified that gap, we've bridged that gap a lot more, and if some of you are kind of feeling like you're in a similar spot, we can help you bridge that gap as well.
So in order to cover all that Megan just talked about, we broke it up into two different sections. There's Smarketing 101 and Smarketing 201. 101 is really going to talk about the foundation. How do we build a relationship? How do we get to that part where we're looking back and laughing at how things used to be and happy and proud of what we are now? And then 201 is how do we take it to the next step? How do we use technology? How do we use communication? How do we use other teams to take us to that next level? So, as with most things, when we first got started on working on this presentation, our first question to ourselves were, what are the 5 stages of falling in love? And we went to the Google, and the Google took us to Glamour magazine, a very trusted resource. And they broke it into 5 stages that we really felt actually aligned well to how we developed our relationship. The first one is butterflies, followed by building, assimilation, honesty, and then stability.
Yeah, so stage number 1, butterflies. Everyone has had the butterfly feeling. I personally love that feeling, maybe personal preference, but there's so much excitement. You're excited about where this relationship could go. There's a lot of potential. You're a little bit nervous, but in a good way, because there's just so much that you don't know about that person yet. And full transparency, this also technically could go horribly. But I think, like I said, marketing historically for me was this big ominous thing. I had people say all the time, oh, reach out to marketing, they might be able to help. What does that mean? Am I supposed to reach out? Do they even know that this is an area where they might be able to help me? Like, there's all these questions and kind of vague things that you just don't know what to do, and it causes that butterfly feeling. The concept sounds awesome of having this marketing partner in crime help you with everything that you're supposed to do, but it's just this big ask. And so I think the other thing that we thought about too is, are they Insta-worthy? Something that maybe the millennials think about more when they're eyeing out a candidate. But it's like, is this person's gonna make me look so great, they're gonna be great arm candy, you know, I wanna be able to go to my leader and say, yeah, Brianna and I are in sync, we work super tight, everything's great, and that's not only gonna make me look better, but it's gonna make my team look better. So these are all things that people think about, and I think just makes the butterfly stage really fun, because you just like want to see where this journey goes and hope that it goes well.
Follow-up question for you, Megan. Okay, so you had the butterflies, but what was the stage before butterflies? Like, how did you get to a point, I'm just curious from a marketing standpoint, to have those butterflies in the first place? What was different? What made that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think at least for me, the part that led to the excitement, and I'd be curious to know if you all feel the same way, is like, it's so exciting to think about the fact that there's someone that could help you with all these things, right? And this is just from a sales perspective. There's a million things you have to do. Create pipeline, manage your pipeline, to reach out to your customers, worry about adoption, run webinars, and I think the idea of someone helping you share those responsibilities is great. I mean, think about it's kind of the same thing from a personal relationship standpoint. You're like, oh, is there someone that's gonna like go through this crazy life with me? So I think that's what got me excited when I just started thinking about everything that we could kind of share.
That's great. I know from a marketing standpoint, I feel sometimes like that meme where it says like, come back here and love me. And so I'm always curious about like, how did people get to that point where they were able to start that love affair?
True.
All right, our next step is building. So you have to have a really solid foundation once you've decided, okay, we're both mutually into each other. I think a little bit about Thanksgiving. So if you have a solid foundation and then all of a sudden, you know, your families end up coming into play and all these kind of curveballs happen, if you have that solid foundation already, you're gonna be able to smooth sail for the most part through. If not, things can go disastrously very, very quickly. We broke that up into 3 different key phases. It's looking at communication, which is super important, as you guys can imagine, external approval, as well as our key interests. What are our key interests and how do we align those to each other? So starting off with looking for external approval, I think the best story that we can think of from a love story perspective is actually Romeo and Juliet. So we know that Romeo and Juliet fell in love and it was a beautiful thing, except for they did not have external approval from their families. And we can all imagine how, and remember how that ended up working out. So I think one of the biggest things that was to Megan and my benefit was that we actually had really positive external approval from our leadership teams in terms of building our relationship, aligning with each other, and moving forward together. And I think that without that, it can be extremely difficult to be able to get to that Smarketing stage. Now, a question I have for you, Megan, and I think of things like TC and end of, you know, the quota at the end of a quarter. How did you end up, like, what would your advice be to someone whose leadership team might not be as excited about marketing or, you know, about a relationship with marketing?
And I think people, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of head nods already, come across this a lot, where you think you're aligned, but then you hear mixed messages from different leaders. So, and we came across that in the past, prior to me and Brianna and our teams being so synced, is just get everybody in the room. There's also other divisions within Tableau that just don't have the powerful relationship that we do. So what we've really tried to do is not only get everyone in the room, get everyone on the same page. I know it sounds simple, but once you find a best practice that really works for you, share it. Like I said, there's other counterparts of myself in the West and Central, and getting that message out and just saying, hey, you guys do you, but this is what worked for us, and if you can mirror this as much as possible, you might find the same success, I think honestly has really gone a long way.
And I think we'll get into this a little bit in 201, but also being able to track your success and show how it's different because you have this relationship versus other teams that might not actually have that relationship.
Yep.
But we'll talk about the data and metrics and tracking in a little bit. Next up is communication. So when I think of communication, I think about, you know, way, way, way back in the day, how people would really focus on, a message in the bottle or a carrier pigeon. Obviously, things have gotten a little bit more simple to show your love with someone. It can be things like dating apps or texting or emails. So it's gotten a little bit easier, and I think of that the same way in terms of our communication from a sales and marketing perspective. How many people here use Salesforce? Awesome. How many people use Tableau? Yeah, good answer. How many people are using Eloqua or some type of e-marketing tool? Pardot, whatever it might be, Marketo. How many people have heard of Outreach? Less people, okay. And how many people, I feel like it's the buzzword these days, is Slack. How many people are obsessed with Slack? I am, I know for sure. The moral of the story is communication is key. Having a CRM to be able to communicate and be on the same page about what's happening within an account with the contact is so important. Using Tableau to really dig into the data and how things are going and what our trends are. Using Eloqua to get the message out and having that feedback into Salesforce is so important. So Megan's team can see what the marketing team is kind of promoting and how people are engaging with that. Using tools like Outreach so that Megan's team can do their own type of marketing, but we can track back, as well as Slack if you just want to have a one-off conversation with Megan as well. Communication is key. But to that point, the interesting thing about communication is you have to make sure you're speaking the same language. Now, one of the things I think about is the word football. If you're in North America, football is one thing. If you're in South America or Europe, football is a completely different thing. And if you're talking to your partner about, like, let's go watch football, and you're talking about two very different sports, there can be a quick misunderstanding of what the heck is actually going on. So that was one of the first things that when I got to Tableau, I came and was talking to Megan about all the things from a marketing perspective of where the different stages were for our marketing funnel, and we realized very quickly we're speaking completely different languages, and that was our starting point. Before we kind of dive into how Tableau looks at marketing and sales funnels, have you guys, done a deep dive into any of your funnel and your kind of terminology and realized that marketing and sales actually has completely different terminology? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. It kind of doesn't make sense, but it is the way that it ends up working out a lot of times as we build out our funnel. At Tableau, we use Serious Decisions as our kind of starting point in terms of building out our marketing funnel. We start off with open leads, and so those are leads, and I would say like the big thing for a marketing funnel that's different is from the sales funnel is a mixture of we really focus on the customer journey, and I put it in here, when I move, you move. Our focus is a bit more, okay, here's the marketing action, and this is the reaction that we expect from the sales team. So when Megan goes through her funnel, you'll see it's more about kind of the opportunity and how it goes through, versus on the marketing team, we really do focus on, okay, if we do this or we have this, we expect the sales team to do that. So we start off with an open lead. With an open lead, we don't expect the sales team to follow up necessarily. They're not kind of warm enough quite yet for the sales team to kind of need to do that follow-up process, and they're going through a nurturing path so we can get them to that next step, which is what we call primed leads. Now, when we hit a primed lead, and we'll get deeper into behavioral scoring and lead scoring in 201, trust me, we'll get real nerdy with it. We expect the sales team to follow up with a primes lead, and it either will go onto an opportunity or push to remarket, which I will discuss a little bit later. But again, the idea is the marketing team is warming up the lead to elicit a reaction from the sales team. Now, the next step from a Tableau perspective is qualifying. So if the sales team has decided, okay, I want to continue to engage with this lead and looking to see if we can put it on an opportunity, it's now in the qualifying stage. Again, if you move, I move. When sales puts it into that kind of section, we end up, on a marketing perspective, taking them out of the nurture campaign. We don't want to overhit them as sales is trying to work them through the funnel. And ideally, the next step is to get them qualified, which means that they're actually on an opportunity. Now, from a field marketing perspective, qualifying and qualified, since they're not getting hit by the nurture campaigns that our corporate marketing might be doing, we start focusing on those in terms of high-touch events. So we might do, an executive dinner or a line of business panel or something that's a little bit more intimate, because we know that they're further along in the funnel, and just really helping align with sales. And a big part of that is our discussion with Megan around her goals and her team's goals for those accounts, and figuring out what the best kind of way to speed up the process is. And ideally, we end as a customer. Now, I mentioned earlier, if we realize that this isn't actually the right time or it's not the right lead, we'll put them into remarket, which means, again, it goes back to the marketing team to continue to warm them up, and sales doesn't have to, touch the remarketing bucket. or we put them in unqualified, which means they're not the right fit.
Yeah. And so on the sales side, our language or our statuses are a little bit different, right? So we use different stages to kind of track how a deal moves through the sales cycle. And it's really just how we track the overall progress of where a deal is moving. And if you don't know that or you're not familiar with that language, it can be kind of hard to stay on track or stay on the same page as us because we ingrain it into most of our conversations. And it's important, right, to kind of understand what's important to us, and then you're speaking a little bit more of the same language. But first we start with mutual interest. We do establish that there's mutual interest between both parties, Tableau and the customer. And then we go through a discovery phase where we just understand about the customer, what the problem is that they might be facing, how are they maybe trying to use Tableau, et cetera. We validate it as a legitimate solution for their business problem. And then we go into the decision stage where that kind of former business case is actually justified and payment terms are set and pricing is set, everything like that. Select, that order date is more finalized, things are starting to look up, we all agree on legal terms, things are almost wrapping up, and then finally we commit. So the PO is signed, it's off for processing, and everybody is one big happy Tableau family. But I think the point here is that these are different than what Brianna just walked through. Our languages are very different, our priorities are a little bit different, and if you don't kind of acknowledge and see that difference, it can be hard to feel like you're really on the same page as your counterpart. Again, thinking back to personal analogies, if you feel like just sometimes you're speaking a completely different language than your partner. But I think the key here is just acknowledge that there are differences. Yes, we speak different languages. We have the same end result, so let's just try to speak each other's languages and move forward together.
So before, let's say like a year ago, would you have been able to name the different marketing funnel stages?
Ooh. Man, put
Can
me
you
on
name
the
them now?
spot. I probably would have been able to name 20% of them.
Okay.
And now I'm maybe at 80. But that's why I call you.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think to Megan's point, the idea is instead of focusing on the fact that we have different, conversational language, it's what do we actually have in common? So a way I think about this in terms of a relationship is around thinking about, okay, I hate cleaning a house. I don't know who, some people do like cleaning the house, so no offense to you all, but I'm not that person. But the end goal is to have a really clean house. So at the end of the day, it's like, okay, does my partner clean the kitchen and I clean the bedroom? Or do we set some money aside and hire a cleaning lady? Really figuring out what do we have in common, what do we want as our end goal? And I think from a Smarketing perspective, we have really a great alignment in our end goals. Of course, the first thing from a Tableau perspective, and hopefully you guys all feel this, is the importance of our customer experience. That's always foundational on our processes and our end goals, is making sure a positive customer experience is what's happening for everyone that we touch. But expanding upon that, when I think of prospecting and lead generation and demand gen, we really wanted to make sure that we are expanding our audience. So for instance, right now we have a huge focus at Tableau around lines of business. So that's people like us, sales, marketing, finance, HR. How are we working together to make sure that we're expanding those audiences? Building pipeline, of course, at the end of the day, building pipeline and hitting quota is important to both the sales team, but also the marketing team. I like getting paid. I like our company making more money. So I want to make sure that we're assisting our team in hitting those goals.
Yeah. So then the question is, what does that process look like towards becoming more aligned? Great, we maybe have different languages, different priorities, but we know that we want to be on the same page. So how do I even start that journey? What are some first steps that I can take? The first thing that we did was ingrain ourselves in each other's world. So a first technical way to do that at least we did, is heavily participate in each other's quarterly business updates. So we get together every single quarter, just my team, for example, and everyone on my team presents their quarterly plan. A lot of you in sales are probably resonating with this, same with marketing. And they lay out their goals for the quarter, what they want to accomplish. And it's really easy for when Brianna and her team sit in those updates to see where they might be able to help, where it overlaps. Oh, yep, that's a goal of mine too. And again, that just wasn't something that we were doing before because we didn't even really think about it. But now Brianna's participation in those updates is just as important as ours. And if you think about it from a personal standpoint, people do this in relationships all the time. You start dating someone, all of a sudden you start participating in their hobbies a lot more. I know for sure I go to more Redskins games than I used to, thanks to my fiance. But it's something that I end up wanting to do because not only can we do it together, but it's important to my partner. So you're naturally going to kind of take on their hobbies, take on their interests, heavily participate in their world. So it's important to do that together on an individual basis. But I think the second thing that we did is participate in larger conversations. So we have these massive East account reviews a couple times a year. And I think that was how Brianna and I first started working together so well, is we would be speaking up in these big meetings, and it's like, oh, wait, that's something I'm trying to accomplish too. Oh, okay, that's something I can align with. And so that's kind of what started this whole budding Smarketing romance. And now it's ironic because we go to those same account plans, but we're going more as a team and as a unit. I already know Brianna's goals, I know her perspectives, we're coming in together, and we're able to align more broadly with other teams and other worlds.
And I think something just to touch on with that, I remember, when I first got started and was sitting in these account reviews, I would hear all these different campaigns that Megan's team was doing, and it was like, okay, one, we're doing those too. Two, you're customizing them a bit more, but why don't we have you focus on what you're really good at, and we will focus on what we're really good at, and instead of just duplicating efforts, let's really kind of align there.
And that's such a sales thing, right? Like, oh, I'm just going to do it myself. Like, my team does that all the time. I think sometimes it's easy to not even know that there's someone who can do it for you, or at least help you do it way better than we would have done it. So it just was great to see.
Okay, so to Megan's point about assimilation, the first thing I think about is actually Brad Pitt. I don't know if you guys have followed Brad Pitt through his relationships, but the most recent ones include Jennifer Aniston, where I feel like he was kind of the all-American looking man, and then he transitioned into Angelina Jolie. That transitional phase is up for interpretation, and he really started looking a little bit different, as you all can imagine, and he kind of transforms with each relationship that he's in. I think about that with Megan in terms of going to see Redskins games. I'm sure that the amount of Redskins paraphernalia you have is much more now than it was before.
Slightly.
So you can kind of see how aligning yourselves with each other can actually start making an assimilation process really valuable. I think parts of that include the rhythm that you develop with each other, how you're growing together, associating with one another. I've been in meetings that Megan and her team were not a part of that, when we started getting down to it, I was like, why isn't her team here? It's really important. We're going to be more successful if we can bring them into this conversation. So realizing when the other person's not in the room or not invited, making sure that they kind of get brought into those conversations. And then, as we guys have heard plenty through this conversation, and communication patterns and knowing how to communicate with each other and how often to communicate with each other is just really key.
For sure. Honesty. Arguably, for many people, the most important, both personally and professionally. I think you establish in any sort of relationship that you're in, like if you're in this for the long haul, we have to be honest with each other so that we can just be the best version of ourselves and move forward. So one of the biggest ways that we've started to do this, even just on a small scale, are these weekly pull-ups that we have. Literally 5 to 10 minutes. Marketing and my team huddles up on our floor and really focuses more on short-term things. Hey, remember we have the Atlanta event next week, we got to drive attendance. Hey, we're going to send over that list, I need your all's help calling down so that we can really get this webinar up and running. There's so much to do from a sales and marketing standpoint, I don't have to tell any of you that these have been really, really key in just making sure nothing falls through the cracks. I think this is one of the reasons why we're able to say that we are constantly on the same page. It's not a big time commitment. Like I said, it's literally 5 to 10 minutes. We all huddle up, kind of focus on what our weekly initiatives are, and that's just been a great way to make sure that we come to the meeting, we're honest with each other about what we need from the other party, and then we just move on. And we track that progress. So what better way to be honest than just put everything out there in the open? It's a very sales thing to do, with just have all your numbers out there for everyone to see. But that progress is tracked. And so if we were supposed to drive people, I'll use the same examples, to that Atlanta event or call down that list, we're going to see that progress, which is a great way to keep ourselves accountable. And Brianna's going to show some vizzes a little bit later on. But then lastly, again, every great relationship is just able to give each other honest feedback. I think when we really started getting in this groove of, okay, we feel like we're a well-oiled machine, we're good, I now feel comfortable to tell you things of what's working and not working, we started being able to do that. And now, whether it's in the weekly meetings or in a bigger conversation, we can say, hey guys, we really didn't get as many people to this event, like we gotta do better next time. Or hey, Bree, I was really counting on your team to help me with this messaging, maybe you can help me more next quarter. As long as you can just have like a professional conversation about that, it just goes so much better. And think about it from a personal relationship. People do this all the time. You should be able to look at your partner and say, hey, you hurt my feelings when you said that. I really want to approach it differently next time. Or, hey, I really appreciate this favor that you did for me. Thank you. That really meant a lot. I try to equate that back to it should be the same in a professional relationship. Again, as long as you're communicating it properly, that's just going to go a really, really long way.
And I think the foundation of that is respect, where at the end of the day, it's not like, again, back to that finger pointing kind of experience. To be honest, we had an experience recently where we were doing a line of business event that was happening in New York City, and we were just not getting the numbers that we thought that we were going to get. And I know that Megan's team, I respect them, I have trust in them that they were driving towards that program, but at the same time, it just wasn't happening. So I asked them, what's going on? What's not working? And they gave the feedback of, okay, I think it's the messaging. We need to update that. And immediately it ended up working. So going back to the idea that we respect each other, we're giving each other feedback because we're trying to make each other better, and not to point fingers is just really key there.
For sure.
And then stability, having that stable foundation that we've really talked about through this whole process is so important. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but I think about Thanksgiving. If you have a plan for Thanksgiving and your in-laws end up stopping in, or someone ends up bringing someone that's not your favorite person, just being able to have that stability, work as a team, have trust with each other, and have a real process in place to maybe keep your mother-in-law in the other room away from you. Whatever it takes, just making sure that the process is going to be great, and that's what we focus on, having that stable relationship on a Smarketing perspective. A lot of times things come that are out of your hands, so there might be a decision that's made at the top levels that you have to do, and it might not be something that you agree with or necessarily think is the best for your territory. Change management is hard for everyone, but because we have a solid foundation and a solid, a stable foundation, we're able to figure out how to best work with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of what we consider Smarketing 101. It's really the base foundation to at least start a really strong partnership between those two divisions. I think I saw a lot of positive reactions, head nodding. I think a lot of people in the room are relating to that on a professional level, maybe a personal level. But I want to take a super quick poll. How many of you in the room feel like you've gone through those 5 stages and you feel pretty good and confident about I've built a successful foundation with my sales or marketing counterpart?
Should be proud about it. Put it in the air.
Yeah, right. I see people that are kind of like halfway up. But I think that's probably about what we expected-ish.
Yep. Yeah. So then, the real question is, okay, once you have that kind of foundational element set up, how do you take it to the next level now that you know, and how do you use technology to really be able to do that? I know that's why a lot of you are in this room curious. So the next Google search we did was, how do you make a relationship last? There's a reason that the divorce rate in America is like 50%. We don't want to have that between the two of us. So we were figuring out, okay, how do we make sure that our positive relationship continues to move forward now that we're in love with each other? So the main, parts of that we figured out were, know that it's going to take work, arguing is good, similarity doesn't matter, have grit, as well as glorify the struggle. And we'll dive into each of these and how we use different systems to really be able to help us with that. So starting off with knowing it's going to take work. It's so easy to be like, rah, rah, we love each other. This is going to be easy sailing from now on. It never is. There's going to be trials and tribulations that end up coming from your teams below you, your teams above you. So it's time to continue to roll up those sleeves and make sure that you are putting the work in. So we kind of broke that into 4 different stages. The first was building out a system. So at Tableau, we do something called sales plays, which I will show an image on the next slide. That really makes it easier for the sales team to be able to be more efficient with their time. So we start off with, let's say they want to target a certain audience, let's say finance. They can dig into what leads we have from finance, what the talk track is, what kind of things we can push them towards, and really understand quickly how to reach out to those different contacts. And again, I'll show you that on the next slide. Building out communication paths. I wish that I could, have a chocolate for each time that we said communication. Obviously very important here, but figuring out what's the best way to communicate with each other. How do we prioritize? So again, going back to that idea of house cleaning, if we have a dining room, I don't really use the dining room that often, so I might not need to clean that one, but my bedroom, I need to clean all the time. How do we prioritize which accounts are getting the most focus? And so we have something called our big bet focus. And then also, how do we make sure that we're aligning others to be supportive of our relationship? That's extremely important. So I mentioned before we do something called sales plays at Tableau. So as you can see here, we use Tableau to really dig into, okay, this is the audience that we want to focus on, and then here's the information that the sales team needs to be able to follow up with that audience, and then in a trackable manner. So how are we going to reach out to them? Is it talking points or is it through emails? What are the follow-up resources that are available? Is it a white paper? Is it a video? Is it an event that's coming up? And speaking of events, how are we building out a dashboard that the sales team can easily go to and make sure that they're understanding what's available to them, and again, specifically looking into those different audiences. Now, I'm sure you guys all have a lot of questions about some of these dashboards, and this is a beginner level, so I didn't want to get too nerdy with it. But one thing I will say as we go through all of these is that all of these are in Tableau Public, and you can look into the sales dashboards that we suggest and marketing dashboards that we suggest. A lot of times, just a little Tableau trick, and I'm sure some of you guys have done that, I'll download one of those dashboards and then work my way back into building it myself. So definitely make sure that you end up doing that. Other things that we like to dig into are what are our large deals? Which are the large deals that we want to help bring across the board? We need to have a little bit more focus and prioritization from both of our teams to really push those forward. How are we using communication to be able to even know what those are? It's going to be end of quarter here, or end of year here at Tableau pretty soon. What are the extra, kind of things that we can do from a marketing standpoint that might be able to help push some of those deals across the line, and how do I have quick visibility into knowing what that is without having to reach out to my sales team? Same thing when looking at a full district. What does the district look like? How are they doing so far? What are the different accounts that are the highest priority accounts? How are we prioritizing those accounts between Megan's team and my team to make sure we're spending more time on those? And then also digging into within an account, what's the engagement look like? How many contacts do we have? How are they engaging with marketing content? What is the conversion rate? What are they, what events are they attending? Really being able to give both marketing and sales a better perspective of, for those large bets or those big deals, what's really working, and then making sure we're hammering in on that.
Yeah. So jumping into the next stage, which is arguing is good, promise, as long as it's healthy. But it is okay to have a healthy disagreement. And we want to encourage people to not be, kind of afraid of that. Everyone's going to have, kind of different priorities. And one thing I think about Brianna bringing up the Thanksgiving and holiday example is holiday schedules. Maybe some of you are currently struggling with this with the holidays coming up. We actually have 4 families between the two of us. We are like literally a real life example of 4 Christmases for anyone who has seen that movie. So we know that we are going to have an uphill battle every single year when it comes to holiday schedules, and it's all good. Like, we hash it out, we find a solution every single time, it's fine, but we're not afraid to kind of come together and bring that. I think the best partnerships truly are 2 people coming to the table, bringing their perspectives, and then just moving forward, at least in a way that works for everybody. And sales and marketing is going to be no different. There's going to be times where we maybe have conflicting priorities, and we need to come together, figure out what works best, and make sure that everyone's content. I think a professional example of that is at the end of last quarter. It was exactly that. It was the end of the quarter. Sales was trying to bring in as much business as we could. It was a hectic time for us. It was nuts. But Brianna's team was super focused, as they should have been, on Tableau Conference and making sure that we had everything to have a smooth sailing conference. And that's okay. We had different priorities. It was a hectic time. We weren't afraid to come together and say, hey, I acknowledge your priority. I acknowledge your priority. Let's figure out a way that we can at least make sure that everything's covered and move forward. I think the key there is just that align perspectives, make sure that you understand the end result for each one. And like I said, it's going to be a lot smoother of a process. I think what happens a lot with sales and marketing is you're like, well, my priority is business, well, my priority is TC, and then people just go off on their own path, and you just kind of forget about your partner. Maybe that happens personally too, like in the holiday example, but I think it's really, really important to just say, hey, we each have our goals, let's see how we can wrap these up together and just move forward. And kind of actually on that same note, with the similarity doesn't matter, going right into the next stage, you don't have to be the same people. We are different people. We have different jobs. It's okay to continue on that path. We all are kind of on this journey for different reasons. And if you think about it from a personal standpoint too, if a lot of you are thinking about it, like you probably have hobbies that don't overlap with your partners. We talked earlier about the Redskins games that I begrudgingly have to go to, but maybe I have hobbies that are completely different from my person's. If they want to go and play sports all day Sunday and I want to be on the couch watching Bravo, that's all right. That's a personal choice. I think the point is that you agree on the end result, whether that be just a stable relationship or marriage or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish as a team or as a couple. If you get there differently, that's okay. That's another thing where I think causes that sales and marketing friction is people expect their marketing counterpart or their sales counterpart to do it exactly the same way that they would, and then they just get annoyed when it's not done the exact same way. I think just acknowledging those differences and understanding that that path might look a little bit different for each and every person is totally fine, as long as you agree on what that goal is that you're trying to reach.
And up next is having grit. It's not easy, as you guys have seen through this whole process, and it's really difficult when you want to take things to the next level. Sometimes, again, it's that elbow grease, it's the rolling up the sleeves, it's how do we get smarter, and how do we kind of move our relationship forward. From a Smarketing perspective, things that I think about, particularly from marketing, my goal is to get Megan and her team as many leads that are those primed leads as possible. But let's say we have a massive influx, how are we going to make sure that we're doing extra scoring? So some things that we do at Tableau include behavioral scoring. We use something called Sixth Sense that tells us about how well of a fit the contact as well as the account is towards our product, as well as what is their intent? What is their intent to buy? What's their timeline look like? How do I prioritize that for Megan's team so they know who to go after first? The other thing that we'll do is something called lead rating. So we have hot leads, A leads, B leads, and C leads. For that, we put together SLAs around, okay, for a hot lead, I expect the team to follow up within 24 hours. A C lead, it can take you, 2 weeks, and that's all right. But again, making that communication pattern of what we expect from our teammate as to how they're going to reach out. I mentioned earlier that I'm not into cleaning. I'm also not into cooking, and so I'm a real gem of a person. And so with that, I don't really enjoy cooking. But let's say my partner is running late, and my partner is usually the one who ends up doing the cooking, and it falls on me. Sometimes I do have to just roll up my sleeves and do it. I think about that in terms of outreach and Discover Org and Sales Navigator. You can't rely on marketing for everything. We have things such as opt-in laws, can't spam. There's a lot of things that kind of hold us back. If we're falling behind in our numbers, it can't just be on marketing to throw more money into digital. Sometimes we actually have a budget and we can't continue to do that. So what we'll do is work with the sales team to figure out the most efficient way for us to work together to get us to the number that we need to be. And I'll show some vizzes of how we do that in the next slide. But we use tools like outreach so the sales team can still reach out and get in front of people that the marketing team don't have opted in and get them opted into certain activities. We have Discover Org so that we can understand what the organization structure looks like. We rely heavily on relationship maps, especially on the enterprise side of the house. So what does that organization look like and who do we decide that we want to target? And then Sales Navigator through LinkedIn and really reaching out to people who, again, we don't have relationships with.
Yeah, another thing that I think of when it comes to having grit is in personal relationships, sometimes you just have to do things that you don't understand why you have to do it. It's the same thing here, right? There might be a list that Brianna asked us to call down this week specifically, and if you're a leader in the room, I try and encourage my team, hey, this is just part of our job. You might understand why this is such high priority, but sometimes just being in a partnership or a relationship just means doing things that you don't always understand the why behind it, and then it's going to be, kind of vice versa somewhere down the road.
Definitely. And here's an example, again, of using Tableau to really have visibility into how things are going. So as I mentioned before, let's say the marketing team has noticed that our leads created is going down. We can't necessarily always just pump more into digital to help us get more leads. Sometimes Megan and I will have to take a step back and figure out how can we work together to get our end goal of having more leads created. It doesn't have to be on just one person or the other. How do we use teamwork to be able to get us to that point? We're digging into how is our lead priming doing? How do we look at it month over month, also as year over year? Are we moving up? How are our leads that are qualified doing? And just being able to, as a team, look at trends and patterns, and also noticing when things aren't going well and figuring out how to adjust towards that. Another thing that we will focus on is what's the marketing impact. To Megan's point earlier, we're talking about, how do you prove value to your leadership team? How does the marketing team and the sales team aligning? How do they make a difference in our numbers? So how are our deals bigger? How are we having more deals? How are we having a better conversion rate? How are we having, again, like bigger deals and bigger opportunities, and then proving out why the value is there in terms of aligning with each other. And then glorify the struggle. There's a lot of things that we just talked about that's a lot of work. Sometimes I do have a day job, so it doesn't always have to be about taking things to 201. I have a lot of things that I have to take care of. But just remembering at the end of the day, like we have the same goals, we have that same foundation. How are we laughing through, the tears and the craziness that's happening? Megan and I travel all the time together in terms of sitting in our account reviews and our QBUs, and we have the best time. We're standing up here talking to you guys because we genuinely enjoy each other's company and we want to share it with each other. So how do you, instead of just focusing on your challenges, how do you focus on your progress moving forward and finding that time to laugh? And I feel like a big part of that, again, is just looking into what's the impact of your relationship? How has it made a difference within your territory? Looking at your open pipeline, like how are things changing because you have a deeper relationship? And that's something that Megan and I have been able to really see in terms of how things have gone for our region versus other regions who are like, how did you guys get to this point? How are things going so well? How are you guys aligning with each other? And how can we follow and do the same thing as well? But it all comes back to data. And it all comes back to visibility into that data, finding those trends, and really being able to dig in and communicate with each other.
Yeah, so at the end of all this, the ultimate question is, how do we keep growing? I'm sure many of you who are married or in a lifetime partnership have asked yourself this, right? Like, you've established that foundation, you've been through a lot of experiences together. Like, how do we just continue to grow as a team, as a partnership? And there's a lot of things that you can do to just continue to expand your horizons. It doesn't have to just be kind of stuck in the same spot. And one thing that we equated it to is you can go on double dates. Brianna and I have really incorporated other teams and other departments into our worlds. Like I said before, of course, it's important that we continue to grow together and that we ingrain ourselves in each other's worlds. But in these big account reviews, we're constantly going to other teams and other departments. How do our goals maybe align with even more teams' goals? And how can they help us accomplish, our agenda and vice versa? It's okay to see a couples therapist, check in with each other, have the bigger, deeper conversations in those QBUs that we talked about. And actually, just out of curiosity, does anyone in the room, like these big QBUs that we've talked vaguely about, do you guys do something similar, like a quarterly update or just a bigger term update? Yes, no, maybe? Cool. I think having an agenda for those and just using that time to really check in. Are you carrying your weight? Are you kind of meeting up to the expectations that your teammate thinks that you're supposed to? But also just equally as important are the weekly check-ins. Asking your person, hey, how was your day, is just as important as the bigger, deeper conversations. The last thing that I thought about when I thought of this term, and maybe this is more fitting for me, especially since we're getting married, is accept their flaws. Not everyone is perfect. It's okay. Know that that person is perfect. Avoid the sales and marketing finger pointing and the blame game. Understand that Brianna's team's not going to be perfect. Our team is not going to be perfect. And the more that you really align and try and lift each other up and support each other and just join in this thing together, the easier that everything is.
Absolutely. So those were our big slides and our big points. We kind of wanted to open this up into a dialogue. We know we covered a lot of information between 101 and 201, so wanted to give you guys the chance to ask some questions, talk about your experience, and we already have a hand up.